Welcome, everybody. We're going to talk today, Brent and I, about verifiable credentials, how they are not new and revolutionary. They're an evolutionary step you can build on top of existing IAM systems. Go ahead, Brent, and we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Drummond Reed, and both of us actually came to Avast from Evernym, where I was Chief Trust Officer. Brent's always been the principal cryptography engineer and the guy that we rely on for all questions crypto. I concentrate mostly on standards in the space and also everything that contributes to governance of decentralized identity ecosystems. And I'm also the steering member for Avast at Trust Over IP. Judith Fleener just walked in. She's our Director of Strategic Engagement. If you have any questions about Trust Over IP, call her sometime during the conference here. So I'm just the setup man for Brent. He's going to deliver the real content here. I'm just going to get you, nice and warmed up for it. Go ahead, Brent. So this is nothing new. In fact, if you went to the fabulous presentation by Christina Yasuda, Senior Identity Architect at Microsoft, just at 4 o'clock, she literally gave you soup to nuts on all the reasons that verifiable credentials are now becoming an accepted part of identity ecosystems. And one of her main messages was, there's no rip and replace involved here. Just like the web layered over all the existing corporate systems, so is decentralized identity verifiable credentials doing that. Now, if you want, you can actually go Google this paper and leave now and go read it, and you'll probably be better educated. No, actually, go read it after you listen to us, because we'll give you a précis on it. OpenID Foundation announced this paper at European Identity Conference, a month ago? And I read the whole thing twice through because I was asked to really provide a detailed evaluation, and it's really a good paper. It not only explains why to use verifiable credentials, but then why and how they layer over existing systems, obviously, especially OpenID. So again, if you just Google that, you can get it. It's very widely known out there. Now, this is just, I'm not going to go into any detail about this. Checked, which is one of the layer 1 utilities for the self-sovereign and decentralized identity space, published this map of all the activity, and they're having to constantly update it, going on with verifiable credentials around the world. Everything up in my corner of the woods, I'm from Seattle. We have a lot of leadership in Canada. BC Gov, as always, is way out there. And several Canadian provinces working on the Hyperledger Aries project and going to be producing their own digital identity wallets. This year, you will be seeing wallets and credentials coming out this year from them. All the way down to this corner, we got Matter in New Zealand, Affinity in Singapore, just all over the place. The main takeaway here, if you don't believe that verifiable credentials are going to be the next major wave, just go listen to what the EU is doing and the fact that over a year ago, it was a EU Commission announcement. By the end of 2023, every European citizen, every member of the 27 member states will have the ability to get a certified wallet from that state at least, possibly also from others, and a credential of their citizenship, a European identity credential, in digital form, and they must all interoperate within Europe, which is quite a challenge. Avast, it's a real pleasure. Now, I now work for a Czech-based company, so we are very involved in that initiative. In fact, we only have 5 of us here because we have like 7 of us at the MyData conference in Helsinki this week, where that's a major subject. So it's happening. Why is it happening? This audience, we probably don't have to say much about, what is it that we're doing with IAM. Go ahead, Brent, we can just dive into it. So basically, with IAM infrastructure, what we've done is we've leveraged accounts. First, we leveraged centralized accounts, which you had to maintain in all the systems, and then we moved into federation so that we could leverage that across multiple systems. That's been extremely useful, and we're now accentuating with multi-factor authentication, things like FIDO2, all the things you can hear about at this conference. Go ahead, Brent. The limitations with account-based identity are, no matter what that account or where it is, it still has a restricted context. Even the social login buttons that you see on websites every place, there are only so many places those can be used. You're not going to find one on your bank, and you're not going to find one in many universities. So it's just an example of the limitation in context that restricts the sharing of data across silos. Now, the other thing about account-based identity is it can only share the information and the authentication that's supported by that particular account. Even if it's a federation that's designed to do that, that's the limitation. We changed that when we moved to credential-based, decentralized credential-based models. And the other advantage, and Christina's already done this, in fact, she did it much better with Virtual Wallet, but I just point out, folks, how do we do identity in the real world today, right? This is actually tremendously self-sovereign. I decide the credentials I'm issued, I carry them around privately with me, I can show them to any verifier. They make up their own policy about what credentials they accept, and whether that will work in a particular context. We just need a way to do that online. And to talk about that, I'm now going to turn it over to a real expert.
Thank you, Drummond. I'm Brent. I do cryptography, and they make me do standards. So here I am. So when we talk about decentralized identity, we're talking mostly verifiable credentials, decentralized identifiers. I think you're all familiar with these specifications out of W3C. We're also talking presentation exchange and DIDCOM that are coming out of the Decentralized Identity Foundation. Trust over IP has a number of standards, up and coming, and the OIDC for VP and OIDC for VC specs. Traditional centralized and federated identity, on the right there, your left, on the left there, has these systems in place so that users can log into them. We know this, it's very straightforward. The decentralized identity technologies invert this relationship so that once an organization has access to a user, through that user, they can actually use the user as an API to connect to whatever other organizations they need information from. So rather than any two organizations coming up with what they're going to pass between each other and what those rails need to look like and what's the process and what's the protocol, once they've established that decentralized identity relationship with a user, they have access through the user to everyone else. This is what Avast is concerning themselves with in this space. We want to give the user space to act as this API safely and privately using a digital smart agent. Within an organization, introducing decentralized identity technologies allows for passwordless single sign-on, smarter access and authentication controls. The big one that we've seen is streamlined and onboarding and efficiencies. These are things that we actually didn't really expect, but we've got a project with the National Health Service in the UK. When COVID hit, they thought, we have these doctors, they are experts in their various fields, and we need them to be able to go from hospital to hospital. Now, the NHS estimates that they spend 100,000 days per year in onboarding doctors and nurses between hospitals. These are existing employees that they just want to go from hospital A to hospital B, and they spend a lot of time getting them onboarded. This is getting them set up with their user access controls, getting them set up with the proper clearances, proper PPI, all of this stuff in place. They've rolled this out to 90 hospitals in an attempt to reduce onboarding. They issued verifiable staff credentials, and we were able to take an average 3-day onboarding time down to a few minutes. And it's pretty darn cool. It's like, this is real. This is actually happening. And the result of that, they got a Best in Verifiable Credentials award at the European Identity Conference this year. Pretty cool stuff. Across different organizations, you see, once those rails are in place for internal efficiencies, you gain access to a broader ecosystem. Any other organization that also has those rails in place, any other organization that has made the user their API is an organization that you can exchange verifiable data with, which is pretty handy. We have some examples, an applicant sharing proof of education or government-issued ID. I can accept that as a credential. which eases onboarding and KYC. Our use case example for this is, again, COVID hit, and airlines were instructed that only those who were safe to fly should be allowed in the air. And the International Airline Travel Association said, we already have to collect passport data. We don't want to collect people's personal health data. We don't want it. Is there any way we can do this without doing that? And we said, make the user your API. So IATA set up the rails, the user holds their own health data, and they transport it across the border. And the airlines never have to touch it. And it's fantastic. And I'm not even keeping up with these. Am I saying everything that I need to? Yes, I am. Okay, good. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Okay, another benefit. Relying parties, on the other hand, using the decentralized identity technologies, they know immediately. They know who issued the credential. They know that it was issued to the person who's presenting it. They know that the attributes haven't been tampered with. They know that it hasn't been revoked. And they can know all of these things without the issuer needing to be involved. This is, to me, the exciting part. As an issuer, I can send the data out, and the verifier never has to talk to me. I don't have to set up any communication. I don't have to be available. I've done my part, and I'm done. It's over. Because the user is the API. It's no surprise that these sorts of efforts are being pushed, as Drummond said, in Europe. You know, the home of GDPR is also the home of implementing wallets and verifiable credentials for their people. All right. We can do all of these things while maintaining privacy if we introduce zero-knowledge proofs or similar technologies. The two primary capabilities that we rely on to maintain privacy with decentralized identity. And these systems are selective disclosure, which is a form of data minimization. It's one of the, FIPS or NIST principles that are very important. This allows a user to only share the things that actually matter. You know, if I'm presenting my driver's license in reality, in real life, I can hand it to the law enforcement officer and they can scan it and go, yeah, okay, you look vaguely like that picture, good. Yes, this license hasn't been revoked. Yes, you can drive. Here's your ticket, and here's your license back. And in the real world, I have confidence that the police officer doesn't have an eidetic memory. They haven't memorized my license. They don't remember whether I was an organ donor or what color my eyes were or even necessarily what my address was. These are things that don't matter in the context of the situation. All that they really need to know is my license valid? Is it mine? Cool. Selective disclosure allows the digital version of that interaction. Machines are really good at remembering things. And so if I have a credential that contains all the data on my driver's license and I give all the data to a machine, what assurances do I have that all of that data isn't going to just be stored for some use case that they might have in the future that is useful? We maybe want to know this information. No, you don't. I only want to give you my license class and the expiration date and proof that it's mine. The other capability that we want to have, this is, I learned a really good word this morning, disassociativity. I even said it right, I think. Okay, so zero-knowledge proofs in a traditional digital signature on the left, you are providing two correlating identifiers. Who is this issued to, and what was the issuer's signature? The signature doesn't change from presentation to presentation. So those are two correlating identifiers that are just built into the system that we really would prefer to avoid, because studies have shown that it takes 3 or 4 points of correlation to uniquely identify anyone on the planet. So let's maybe not build a system that provides 2 of those just for free. We want the ability to share the attributes without providing unique correlating identifiers. With a zero-knowledge proof, you don't need to share the signature value. You can share proof of knowledge of the signature. It's magic. It's awesome. I'd love to talk to you more about it in detail, but I don't have time today. But hit me up. I love to talk about this stuff. Same with the identifiers. I don't need to prove ownership of an identifier or a public key in order to show that the credential is mine. I can prove knowledge of the public key in zero knowledge. It's great. All right. And I think I am really, really over time. Okay, so decentralized models expand the usefulness. We build on top of traditional PKI to make it a little more flexible, a little more open, hopefully a little more private, and definitely a little bit more in the control of the person whose data it is, the data subject. So how can we get these things to work together? Our friends at Accenture wrote a really awesome paper. You should take a picture of the slide down here, because I don't really have time to go through the whole thing, which is too bad, but it's great. It talks about Maya, who gets a university degree, and she can use that credential to get a job. And then she gets on board and she gets an employment credential, and she uses those credentials in a traditional way to authenticate and perform her work. Now we can extend this and say Maya also gets her employment credential and she presents it to the bank so she can apply for a mortgage. Internal efficiencies and external ecosystem that benefits the organization, plus it benefits Maya. So the big takeaway, the goal for this presentation is that decentralized identity is not a replacement for IAM. It's an additional set of tools that we think actually work really well together. So expand the toolbox. We want to take everything that's good and add some more possibly good things. All right, so the key benefits that we've talked about, mostly for organizations. Within an organization, this is the portability of data. We've talked about cross-silo data sharing. It's, as Drummond pointed out, it's not authentication or account-based access, it's credential-based data passing and data sharing. Imagine you have a customer, they have established a relationship with the sales department. With decentralized identity on top of that, they can now bootstrap a connection with the billing department or with the customer feedback department. So you don't need to look at your records and connect things there. I'm bumping the chin, sorry. Like authenticated user feedback, you know what they bought, you know how they bought it, and you know that not because you had to connect to the sales department, but because the user carried that data with them and served as the API to give you that information right back. Externally, organizations can now take part in the broader ecosystem. So Maya, she's using her employment credential to try to get a mortgage. We talked about faster and easier onboarding. And this isn't theoretical stuff. This is experiences that actual organizations have seen the real benefit of. And for users, it's a streamlined experience. Imagine all the benefits of third-party tracking cookies without the creepy effects of third-party tracking cookies. It's like a personalized online experience that matches my mental model of the data that I've shared coming back to me. So if I search for a Jeep Wrangler, I don't get Jeep Wrangler ads for the next 7 months because I can also share that I already bought one and it was great. I don't own a Jeep Wrangler. I don't know why that came out. Anyway, more connected digital world, personalization, trust and privacy without the creepiness is the goal. And we believe that having a digital smart agent on their side will enable users to take full advantage of this system. So, awesome, I did it. Okay, any questions? We've got about 5 minutes left. Thank you.
You couldn't have been totally overwhelmed by that. You must have some questions. Otherwise, why stay for the rest of this conference?
I have the mic. Hi, thanks for that. You mentioned kind of the notion of the user being the API, which I like a lot. Has there been any thought around, say this technology rolls out and is massively adopted, and someone at the age of 18 uses their digital wallet for their entire lifetime and accumulates all of this stuff that they're the API for? Has there been any thought about limitations around that, or just large bloat, like your wallet literally gets full?
We have. I will admit, to a certain extent, we've thought that would be a great problem to have someday. let's let future us solve that problem. But at the same time, we are actively looking at, okay, this digital signature we're currently using is big and requires the credentials to be much larger. So we're actively transitioning to ones that are a tenth the size. And so for credentials held on a smartphone or devices like that, that's path toward a solution. We're also looking at how do we enable cloud-based wallets to give the same privacy and access and encrypted security that we would want on an edge device without the problems of bloat quite as much. I hope that answers your question.
Let me point out one advantage to that trail of auditable events, all cryptographically signed. Yes. That's yours. It belongs to you. It's not sitting in a browser someplace. It's not being shipped off someplace. Even if it goes to the cloud, that's your cloud, encrypted with your keys. Imagine the future of identity when you can prove all of that about yourself, and it gets stronger and stronger with every passing day. This is one of the reasons that Avast believes that emphasis now on the wallet is going to move to the emphasis on the agent that allows you to share and prove those things about yourself in a way that you can't do with any other identity technology today.
Hi guys, easy question I think. So I'm involved in standardization around verifiable credentials and driver's license and so on. For the world map, so the term verifiable credential is very, very broad, obviously. Do you have an equivalent map, or do you know of an equivalent map that says what the credential formats are that are in use in those various projects? Because each one might have a different one, but are there any common ones that are emerging?
Common credential formats that are emerging. I'm glad you mentioned it. The Verifiable Credentials Working Group at W3C, the charter just got approved. Our first meeting under the new charter is the end of this month. So we will soon be refining one of those data models for use in verifiable credentials. The key ones in play that I know of are verifiable credentials as defined by the W3C, MDLs, anonymous credentials as defined by Indy, and then I think that's pretty much it. But even within the W3C, there are so many different flavors and types and options there. I'm hoping that under the new working group we can refine those and get a little bit more clarity under how to truly be interoperable within that space, which I think is where you were going with that.
So Brent's being a little modest. He is the co-chair, along with Christina Yasuda from Microsoft, of the new working group that begins next Wednesday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so if you're interested in the whole second generation of standardization of verifiable credentials, join W3C, and please, or if you're a member, please have your reps join that working group. I think it's going to be really, the whole space has evolved so much that the second generation is where they're going to be able to address a lot of things that we couldn't get to in the first one.
Yeah.
Also, a pitch for Andrew. If you want to know about MDL, that's the guy to talk to.
Yeah.
Thursday. Oh, it's coming on Thursday.
So I think we have time for one more if anybody else has a question.
If we were to get to a stage where everything can be recorded about yourself and reported by all the different things you access, is there any way we can wipe out those histories or at a certain point on your digital wallet? Or
I'm not sure I totally caught the question. Could you?
let's say if everything about yourself over your whole lifetime get recorded into a digital wallet or whatever reports you have, is there any way you can, what I'm saying, you can wipe out the things you don't want to be there in the first place?
The short answer is yes. The goal of the technology that Drummond and I are involved with, that we're actively building, is for that data to be under the control of the person holding it. So yeah, it was issued by someone, but it was issued by someone to your wallet. Now, there obviously would be problems with things issued about you to someone else's wallet, but that's where nascent legislation like GDPR we anticipate would evolve to cover that. The right to be forgotten persists even though technology changes.
I will use all the implication technologies of that report, digital wallets, that's still up to the vendors or people to provide the services.
Yeah, but as the holder of the wallet, you still have the right to decide whether or not to share those or whether to keep them in your wallet forever, which, roughly equivalent to forgetting them. So thank you, everybody, for coming.
Who has a question?